Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen. I'm an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple different reasons. The first of which is to take my brain out of motor background work over the course of the week and move into the process of writing and preparing the sermon that I'll preach to my congregation for the weekend. That's the first. And the second is just to allow you, the viewer who's graciously given your time to come and check out this video, to gain some different insight into the assigned text for the week. So that is why I do these. This particular Sunday, October 7th, 2018, I almost said 19 there. Apparently I'm thinking ahead. This is the 20th Sunday after Pentecost, and our gospel lesson comes out of Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 16. Disclaimer, it's the divorce text. Arguably one of the least favorite passages out of the assigned common lection, the revised common lectionary for people to preach on, or at least for this person to preach on. I do not like this text. I do not enjoy when this text comes up, because I know what this text has been used for in terms of hurtful, judgmental comments or judgments or whatever we want to say towards people who have been divorced in the past. And not a fan. I know what this does to some of my people who have shared things with me from their own lives, their own experience. It's not a fun text. But the disclaimer that you got to put out there is that when it comes up, you got to talk about it. I was talking with some colleagues earlier this week, and the way that our bulletin is formatted here in my congregation, it's printed. So even if I don't read it, the people will look and see, and they'll wonder, why isn't he reading that? And then they'll see what it is. So the second we start reading this, I think there are some, if not everyone, but there are definitely some who instantly have a sermon in their minds, and it's probably not a good one. So all right, that being said, I'm going to dive into it. Again, it's Mark 10, verses 2 through 16. Some Pharisees came, and to test Jesus, they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her." But Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote this commandment for you. For from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." Then in the house the disciples asked him again about this matter. He said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." People were bringing little children to him in order that he might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the little children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever has not received the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. All right. A quick thought about the back half, because it seems at first glance that these are two very, very, very different passages that all seemingly have nothing to do with each other. We've been in a period of Mark's gospel now, kind of through chapters 8, 9, 10, where this recurring theme of the little ones keeps coming up. And in the case of children, in this case, oftentimes it seems to be children, but sometimes Jesus switches up and says these little ones. It seems to be the vulnerable, the ones who maybe vulnerable is the best word. Those who are unable, they don't have the power, they don't have the influence, they don't have the ability, for whatever reason, they're the ones that are marginalized, and they have no choice in the matter. Now, in Jesus' day, children definitely fit that mold. Women also fit that mold, and therein, I think, lies a connection with this divorce text. Now, I'm going to go back and talk about that a little bit, but I want to say it right here up front that what Jesus is doing here, the way he's responding, is actually challenging the patriarchy. From what research I've done, from what we can tell about divorce in the first century, at least within the Jewish culture, it was all in the men's court, that the man could, depending on who you talk to, could basically issue a certificate of divorce to his wife for whatever reason he felt like. Now, I've also read that there's some debate about that even in Jesus' day, there was This isn't the right terminology, but for lack of a better word, a liberal versus conservative view on what's acceptable within the realm of divorce, or reasoning behind it. And that possibly that's why the Pharisees are bringing this up, because they want Jesus to take a public stance so they can discredit him and make him lose face, or try and save face and lose face with others, or get into a political hot water. But anywho, so the power sat with the man, and that in the terms of like damages caused by adultery, that's not against the woman, but it's against the next husband, or the damages of or the offense caused by adultery is against the husband. So the woman apparently doesn't even figure into this equation, and Jesus is challenging that with what he says. That basically, if we look at it closely, it seems that Jesus is putting women on equal footing with men here, and that was a challenge within the society. And yet, as difficult as this text is, maybe that's a little glimmer or a little grain that we need to hold on to, is that Jesus is still challenging the system, that there are some who should be placed above others, that there are some who have power or sway over others, and that there are some who are subservient to others, that in the kingdom of God, or in the kingdom of heaven, or whatever terminology we want to use, things are going to be different. I read one thing yesterday too that also kind of resonated in this whole discussion, that when Jesus brings up Genesis and the whole marriage thing, or that they will become one flesh, what he's basically saying is the indication of relationships in the kingdom of heaven, in the ideal, in the whenever that is, in the age to come, that there will be no need for divorce, that marriages will, or not marriages, that relationships will be healthy and will share in the mutual benefit of one another. I can't help but think about this whole thing in terms of relationship, that if we go back to the beginning, God formed humanity to be in relationship with one another. Both men and women bear the divine image. We hear that in the first account of creation. And in the second account of creation, the man is around, the mud dude, or the mud person, Adam, or Adam. And we hear it is not good for the man to be alone. I will create, the way ours is, our English translation comes out, is I will create a partner as his helper. I heard a professor talk about this, not a real great translation. It's I will create a counterpart. And the word for helper, which my Hebrew is horrible, so I'm not going to try and tell you what it is. The word for helper is usually given to God, or if we think about the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, that it's the helper is the paraclete, the spirit, the advocate, whatever. So I will give a counterpart to be in partnership, to be together, to be in this. So helper is not the greatest word with our subservient connotation. Okay. So there's all of this going into it, but that humanity is designed, if you want to use that word, but humanity is made, is created. Our existence is tied up in relationship with God, relationship with one another, relationship with the world that we share, and yet there's brokenness, and I think that comes all the way back around to when this question is posed to Jesus in the first place. It's a weird question, and we hear that the Pharisees are trying to test him. Like they know the answer to this question: is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? And Jesus is like, what did Moses say? And then they talk about what Moses said, which is in itself is an odd situation because it references back to Deuteronomy 24, I think, like 1 through 4. And in those 4 verses where it talks about issue a certificate of divorce, it's actually, if you read through the whole thing, that if a man issues a certificate of divorce and releases his wife, and then she goes and gets married to another guy, and he issues a certificate of divorce, it's not lawful for then the first husband to then try and marry her again. That's the whole thing if we read a little bit farther. So it's kind of like, what? As Jesus says, it's because of your hardness of heart. It's because of the brokenness that already exists in the world that this was made lawful to do. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing. And here's the point that I feel like I think I've made before. When it comes to divorce, the divorce is the death of a relationship. Whether or not it's the right thing, whether or not it's the best thing, it's still not a good thing because it is the death of a relationship. And therefore it's painful and it's hard and it's messy. And people get hurt within it, and people in proximity are hurt by it, and children who are part of it are hurt by it. In the death of the breakdown of a relationship is never a good thing, even if it is still the best thing. And this points towards the brokenness of this world. And I think that's where I'm going to go with this sermon. Honestly, I'm not there yet. I don't know exactly. There's a lot happening here. But we remember the promise of the gospel within this is that we have a God who can and does create new life out of death. And that these signs of the brokenness of our world, both the brokenness that lies within us and the brokenness of our reality in general, those things don't get the last word. God does. Always God does, even when it doesn't feel like it. Even in those times when that voice in the back of our head says you deserve this, or you're not good enough for this, or you're not worthy, or whatever those stupid things say, that we all hear those doubts, those fears, those questions, the fear that you should have done more, or you should have worked harder, or you're a failure because of this. All of those lies, God is bigger, and the promise is bigger, even in the times when it doesn't feel like it. I'm going to cut this off because now it's time to write and try and find a way to proclaim the gospel into a painful situation. If you have thoughts, questions, comments, by all means, throw those down in the comment section. We can continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, I hope you have a blessed week. We will catch you next time.